yes.
I've seen pictures of the outside of your house. What was the house like inside?
What the house like inside?
Yeah, how many bedrooms?
Ah, okay. Well, the house was started being built in Queen Anne's time, so it was a small farmhouse originally, and there was some small rooms, and then later on other things got added on, and in the 19th century, late 19th century, my grandfather added on 2 big rooms downstairs and 2 big bedrooms upstairs. So starting with the small rooms, there was an entrance hall to the whole house, which was actually a room which had been converted into the entrance hall.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went through a little sort of passageway, and we went along another little passageway, and then there was a small sitting room. And beyond that was a dairy that had been added on at some point. So that was a big room with a big tile floor, and it was a cool room for the dairy. And then behind the little sitting room was a big kitchen, where you have a big kitchen table, and it had a sink with a couple of faucets. One was for hot water, one was for cold water. And the cold water came from a well, and the well was pumped every day by our handyman Jagged, who pumped water up to the attic to a tank. And that water was delicious. And the hot water we only had every now and again, because that depended on Father lighting a stove to heat the water.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that big room. And then, so then we'll go back out. And there was a big walk-in larder, which faced it on the north side of the house to keep food cool, as we didn't have refrigeration. And then we walked back through the little passageways through the big entrance hall to the big rooms. And the big rooms is a large dining room and then a large drawing room. The large dining room has a stove to heat it. The big drawing room has a big fireplace with a basket to burn logs in it. Then you go up some stairs, and there are 2 big bedrooms upstairs. Mother and father slept in one, and my sister Susan, who died when she was 7, slept in the other. Then you leave those 2 big bedrooms and go down some steps, about maybe 5 or 6, I don't remember exactly how many, and that would take you into the bathroom for the whole house, 1 bathroom, whole house. And in the bathroom, it was the size of a room, because it was made out of a room. And it had a bathtub and a toilet and a wash basin and not much else, big chest of drawers and some rails to hang towels on. And then you go out to the bathroom on the opposite side from when you went in, and there you come to 3 bedrooms over the sitting room and the kitchen. And in fact, over the sitting room and the passageway and the stairs. Anyway, the upshot of it is, one of them was very small. It was called the box room, but eventually it just had junk, and eventually I cleared out all the junk, and that became my bedroom. And then the big bedroom over the kitchen was where Cherry, June, and I all slept for many years. And then because we were renting out the other bedroom was rented out. So there were 3 bedrooms. Altogether, there were 5 bedrooms. That's your answer to your question.
And what was on the walls?
What was on the walls?
Mm-hmm.
Paper.
No paintings, no photographs?
We didn't have photographs. My mother had paintings. We had paintings from her uncle Thomas More. He was
Not the Thomas More.
No, a different one. He was quite well known.
Mm-hmm.
He used to come and stay at a pub near where we lived every summer, so that he could paint the fens, which were close by. Mm-hmm. And so he gave Mother 1 or 2 paintings, and then there were some paintings she inherited from her family, and she had some paintings and etchings from Auntie May on my father's side, but we didn't have photographs. She had a camera before the Second World War, and she took the photographs.
Those would go in an album.
We never had, they were in boxes, they weren't in any albums. And they were very few and far between. No photographs on the walls.
How about books in the house?
Books were very short supply. My sister June always complained, there weren't any books in the house. There weren't any books in the house. Oh, God, quite ridiculous.
So was there a library to go to?
At that time, there wasn't a public library. At that time, there wasn't a public library. There was a lending library in one of the stationery stores, and you rented books from them. But they didn't have any books for children. The kind of books that my mother rented was reading Mill and Boone, or Boone's and Mills, whatever it's called. And my mother liked Westerns.
Do you remember learning to read?
No, I don't remember anything about that.
Did you
My
buy
sister
books?
did what?
Did you buy books?
There weren't any. A, there wasn't any money, and B, there weren't any books to buy.
That's right, because during the war anyway, there were books were printed on really garbage paper.
Well, we didn't have any money anyway.
But you had plenty of food.
Plenty of what?
Food.
Yes, we didn't starve.
Yeah.
Farmers.
So what was the neighborhood like? How far away was the next house?
The next house was 50 feet.
No. So there was an actual neighborhood.
Yeah, we lived on a street, but yeah.
Was there a poor side of town?
No, it was all mixed up. I suppose I might say where the council houses were was the poor side of town. Yeah. There were some streets which might have a whole lot of small houses. But for example, on our street, there was the vicarage, so that was a big house. Ours was a big house. And then next to us on one side was a bakery, and then on the other side was a pub, and then on the other side of the pub was what is known as a court. And it was same as a court, mobile motorhome, no.
Caravan.
In the Depression here in the 30s. And it was just a little circle of small houses where poor people lived. And then there was another court across the road from our house. And then there were some nice, decent-sized houses. It was just a complete mix. And it was like that all over town.
So when I watch British real estate shows, there's always a big deal about detached houses. There aren't very many detached houses. A lot of duplexes and row houses. So were there a lot of detached houses?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, because where I grew up, they were all detached houses. They were all had their individual yards or gardens.
Well, our house was a big old house, and it was made a farmhouse. The house where the bakery was, that was a duplex. Or is it a duplex? There were two of them anyway. And then there was a detached house, and then there was another detached house, and then it was just completely mixed up. And then there was a little row of sort of 3 or 4 sort of cottages, and then on the other side of the road, set back from the road, there was a row of 3 or 4 houses. And then there was a single house, and then there was another single house, and then there was the vicarage and another single house, and then there was a place where there were 3 houses set sideways to the road. Further along from when you got past where we lived, this street went out to the country, far past where we lived, it was mostly smaller houses and farm.
Mm-hmm.
It's a farmyard. And my father had a farmyard further along the road. And then there were these houses, sort of a row of houses with water closets in the backyard. They didn't have built-in water closets.
I saw a study done in 1947 that only 46% of houses in Britain had bathrooms. So you were among the majority who actually had a bathroom.
We were among the minority.
Well, 54% had bathrooms, so you're in the slight majority.
And that's probably exaggerated.
Yeah. It was a government study, and we know how accurate they are.
I mean, when I think about it, there were a lot of houses without bathrooms on our street.
Right, they used portable baths, like they had, not a bucket, but they'd have a bathtub that they would just fill up with water.
You'd have a bathtub that you could sit down in the bathroom and fill with hot water.
Yeah.
And kettles.
Did you have a big radio in the house? A stand-up radio, a big radio that you used to gather around to listen to the radio.
Well, we didn't have anything like that. we had a radio, but it wasn't a big stand-up one. It was on the mantel shelf.
Yeah. When do you remember starting to listen to the radio?
From from when? What from what time?
Well, when you were, preschool or grammar
I have
school?
no recollection of the radio before I was probably 10 or 12 or 15.
So 10 or 12 was pretty much the end of the war.
Yeah, I know, and I don't remember. I don't remember listening to the radio. I don't know whether we had one. I assume we had one because everybody had a radio to listen to the 9 o'clock news. But doesn't mean to say that I listened or had any importance put any importance on the radio.
About music.
We didn't have any music. My mother played the piano, and that was the only music we had.
That's what most people had until probably the 50s.
Yes.
I mean,
But mother refused to teach any of us how to play the piano, which was very selfish of her. Typical mother.
what was she like?
Well, my mother?
Yeah.
Well, my mother was actually, she had some good sides and some good, not so good sides.
Like all of us. Like all of us.
Yes. She was a party girl. She loved going to parties. She loved playing tennis, and she would, do anything to go and play tennis. And she liked to go to. Later on, when it became more acceptable for women to go to the pubs, she would love to go to the pubs too. And whenever we got an invitation, this was later on when the American Air Force bases came to existence, whenever there was an open invitation to father from the officers' club, then we all went. We all piled into the car and went to the party up at the officers' club, and she loved it. She loved playing bridge. She would take my sisters and me with her to different places, and she would take us to the pubs with her because we could sit in the little ladies' room, which was away from the bar, and she could talk to her friends. My mother grew up in a small village 3 miles from Mildenhall. She grew up in a small village called Beck Row, which is where her father was the headmaster of this little tiny village school. And so when she was a girl, she was probably the life and soul of the party, because she was engaged 3 or 4 times before she married my father. And, one of them, I think, disappeared during this First World War. And another one said he couldn't marry her after all because he had TB or something like that. And I don't know what happened to the other one. But anyway, she eventually married father. But she still had boyfriends. I mean, I don't know that she had boyfriends, but there were still men living in Mildenhall who obviously remembered her when she was young. Was a party girl. But so anyway, so she's married to father, and he's trying to make a living, and he grows fruit and vegetables and flowers for London and for wherever he can sell them. And he has this other farmland where he grows sugar beet and wheat and barley and that. No, he didn't grow wheat. Wheat is tricky. So he grew barley because it's much easier. And anyway, so my father had to hire help. And one of the categories of help he had to hire was women to cut the flowers so they were nicely cut and bunched to send to London. And mother refused to do any of that kind of work. She had a maid at the house. She had a nursemaid for me when I was a little girl. And she was used to the idea of not working. But anyway, eventually she realized that she got to work so that they could live. And so she would get up early in the morning and go out and cut the flowers and bunch them and put them in the buckets of water ready to be packed to send up to London. And I did that sometimes, mostly during the summer vacations. And Cherry did it June, and June did it for some, not much. June left home about when she was 16 and a half or something. And Cherry stayed on, and then Cherry got pregnant at 18, and that was that. But mother didn't cook. She was a lousy cook. She never taught us anything exciting how to cook. So June went to cooking classes, and after she got married, because she didn't really know how to cook. Sherry was a pretty good cook, but she just did all the usual meat and gravy stuff.
Okay, how about school?
Mother was always, and you know, a mother would walk down the street and we would stop and we would talk to this person, and then we would stop a little bit further and we would talk to somebody else. And then when she couldn't play tennis anymore, she played golf, and it was the same thing. She was always wanting to play golf, but she did work. She did work for father when it came to it. And then later on, the mother of my friend was working at the American Express on the Laken Heath Air Force Base, and she got mother a job working at the American Express basically as a teller, I think. And mother did that for years. And she also played organ, church organ, for years and years. So she wasn't, I mean, she's had a lot of energy and she could do a lot of stuff.
Your father was pretty much around the house all the time because the family business was there.
Well, father served in the First World War as a pilot, not as a pilot, as an observer, when his friend from boarding school was the pilot. Where I haven't found anything about either him or his friend. His friends got the MC, but that's all I know. But anyway, so father did serve in the war. He was in the trenches at first. And then in 1926, he contracted encephalitis lethargica, and he was paralyzed down one side. And that was before he married mother. The story that they told, or mother told, wasn't that father's family thought that maybe a trip on a cruise ship around the world would help him not be paralyzed. And so mother and father were courting at that time. And she apparently said to him, if you go on that trip, I won't be here when you come back.
Oh.
So they got married. And father's father gave him his inheritance, which was the land and the house where we lived, and the land behind it, which is where we grew all the flowers and the vegetables and things for market. It wasn't a large piece of land, but it was enough. So father had to help, work that land. And although he was paralyzed down one side, he did as much as he could on the land.
So that paralysis remained?
What?
That paralysis continued?
It never left him. Encephalitis lethargica doesn't go away.
So that cruise wouldn't have done any good?
I can't understand you, Walter.
So that cruise wouldn't have done any good?
Oh, no, it would have been a waste of money, yes. They didn't know that at the time, and this is 1926.
Yeah. So how about school? When did you have a recollection of school?
I've written about this, I can tell you, right from the start. So when I was first in school, which would be kindergarten, I went to a private house where this woman ran a little private kindergarten. And among the students were two of my cousins, and little Lord Hyde, and Susan Cutler, I can still remember her name. And there was probably about 10 of us. And Miss Anderson, our teacher, taught us in the bedroom of her parents' house. And then the war came along. Miss Anderson said, I'm going to be an ambulance driver, and she left. Mm-hmm. So all these little monsters didn't have anywhere to go to school because we were too good to go to the local public school. Oh. This was 1939, and England was very class-ridden. And we were the Parkers. The Parkers in Mildenhall. Anyway, so one of my uncles had a big house with a billiard room. And what happened was somewhere along the way, somebody found a brother and sister from France. They were refugees from France. And it was agreed that they would take on these little kindergarten kids. My sisters were at a private school, actually across the road from that house. But that was because they were older. Anyway, so the upshot of it is these two French, and they probably weren't even 25 yet. They were probably more like 20. They didn't know a thing about teaching. They didn't have much English, but there they were stuck with these 10 kids to teach. So that was a complete waste of time.
So
to pieces.
So after that, you went to What kind of school did you go to for the first 4 or 5 years?
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
The next school I went to was a public school. It was in England. The Church of England ran a lot of the schools, and I went to one of the Church of England public schools. And there I was completely out of my class. And I don't remember ever having a friend or anything like that. And anyway, so I don't know how long I was there. I don't remember anything about the classes or anything. It's a total blank. I remember being in the playground one day doing gymnastics, and I was too hot, and I couldn't take off my sweater to cool down because I had holes in the elbows of my blouse. They hadn't fixed them, and that sort of thing is just too awful for a young person. Anyway, so I was there for some time. I don't know how long. And then mother got me into a convent school in Newmarket. Newmarket by road is only 9 miles. But I took a very circuitous route every day to get to school. I rode my bicycle to the train station. I put my bicycle in the guard's van and rode in the train with my sister June. And then I got out at what is known as a halt. A halt is a place where the train stops, but there are no buildings or anything. And so it's by road, and so you climb up the embankment and to get to the road. So I was dropped off there with my bicycle, and I would get on my bicycle, and then I would ride to the nearest village and leave my bicycle at a pub, and then I would catch a bus from that village to Newmarket, and then I would walk to school.
So how long did that take?
I don't know, but I had to start about 7:30 in the morning.
But something like at least an hour and a half.
School didn't start till 9.
Yeah. So it was an hour and a half.
I didn't get home till 5. Anyway, so one day I'm waiting for the train to come to the halt after school on my way home, and a man comes and talks to me. And this man is actually a soldier who's been wounded. And he's actually in the hospital, the military hospital in Newmarket, but he's well enough to go for long hikes, and he came and talked to me. And so we chatted, and then the train came, and I went on the train. And apparently I had said that I would be there the next day, because the next day I wasn't at school because it was a Saints' Day, and there weren't any classes. And so at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I said to my mother, "Oh, I forgot to tell that man I wouldn't be there today." And so she said, anyway, so the next day she went with me to school, and she made arrangements that I wouldn't have to wait at that place. I could wait at a nearby farmhouse. And then very shortly after that, Father found a place for me in Thetford, which is the home place of Thomas Paine. Anyway, so I went to school in Thetford, and at that time I was 10 and a half. So I had all that schooling to no avail, to absolutely no avail for 5-6 years. And at Thetford, I was taken on probation for 1 semester. And so that was the spring. I was there for, they took 2, it'd be 2. I was taken on in January, and the school year was going to end. And if I hadn't pulled up my socks and made progress by the end of the school year, I was out. Well, I did very well, of course. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed at that school until I graduated when I was 18, because that was how things worked in England.
So how about this business of O-levels and GCSE? Was that in place when you were going?
Oh, yes. Yeah, in fact, at that time, they had the 11 plus exam as well. My sister Cherry had taken the 11 plus exam because she got into Newmarket High School. So she had taken it and passed. Cherry's very smart as well as everybody else in my family. Anyway, June was at another private school in Cambridge. And then I was at Thetford. And Mother had always had the idea that she didn't want us to go to the same school as each other, because she had gone to school with her older sister, and her older sister was a goody two-shoes. And from what I've already said about mother, she was not a goody two-shoes.
Sure.
So she didn't want us to be burdened with having an older sister in our school. Okay, O-levels, because they were ordinary. And those you took at the end of the 5th form. So that made you about 15, on 16. And these are nationwide exams, except that they were not set nationwide. They were set by local universities. So the O-levels at my school were set by Cambridge University. And they did they'd set these exams, and you took different subjects, and there you are, you just took them. And that was a certificate to get you somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And then after that, you would study for 2 years, and then you would take A-levels if you were thinking of trying to get into university or one of these big technical 2-year colleges. And so you would choose to study the subjects that interested you. So you could study 3 or 4 subjects. And at the end of the 2 years, you would sit the A-level exams, and you would be writing essays. 3 hours to write 3 essays? No. Anyway, I forget what the numbering was. But you wrote essays. You didn't do multiple choice at that time.
So,
And depending on what your grades would depend on if you got accepted at the university of your choice. But you must remember, my school experience was not the same as everybody else's, because I was taken over to Thetford at first I was there for the whole term, living in the boarding house with Mrs. Wilson and a whole lot of other girls, because it was wartime and there wasn't any gasoline to drive people backwards and forwards. And then after the war, when the gasoline was still on short supply, I stayed at Mrs. Wilson's all week. And gradually, she just let all the girls go until I was the only one. And she wanted to keep me till I left high school. But I eventually said I'd rather go and live somewhere else for the last year or so of my years at school.
were there any kids from London who had been evacuated because of the bombings who came to your school?
That's a whole nother subject. I'm going to finish school.
Okay, finish school. It's your show.
So what happened? Oh, yeah. Okay, so Mrs. Wilson let everybody go except for me, and I was the only one she kept. I can't imagine why, because she was a terribly strict woman, and I never felt as I could do anything good enough for her. But anyway, so I stayed with her. I stayed at school, and I did my O-levels, and I did my A-levels. And then after I'd finished the A-levels, the teachers at my school decided I should try to get into Cambridge University. So anyway, the teachers at my school wanted me to do the exam to get into Cambridge University. And you didn't get into the university, you actually took an exam for one of the colleges.
Right.
In my case, we tried to get me into, I can't remember. There were only 2 women's colleges at that time, and they wanted to get me into one of them. So I took the exam. I had to study Latin for that particular exam. And I had to go over to the boys' school, which was across the road from my girls' school, for the Latin classes. And that was a waste of time, because I was much more interested in the boys than I was in Latin. So I don't know what I did wrong, but I didn't get into, it was Girton College. Girton did not accept me, and I've thought of that, of why they didn't. One could be that my academic record wasn't good enough. Another reason could have been that we didn't have any money. And a third reason could have been it's because we weren't the right class.
That's probably the right reason.
So that, anyway, I didn't get in. And when I heard about March or April that I hadn't been accepted at Girton, I said, screw it to school. And I went home and I said, I'm not going back to school anymore. And then I went to work. So that's the school business. Then we'll go back to when I went to university later on. We'll talk about the evacuees. So when when the Second World War began, there was a lot of panic because the Germans were going to be bombing London, and they did bomb London. And so the British government decided to send the children out to the countryside. And they sent children to Mildenhall because we were countryside. Suffolk is very rural. But I think they made a miscalculation because Mildenhall has an air force.
Right.
And the Germans came and bombed that airfield quite a lot at the beginning of the war. They sort of gave out later and went to other places, but at the beginning of the war, they were bombing all the time. We had a cellar under our house, a brick-built cellar under our house, and that was where we went when the siren rang. We had bunk beds down there. Anyway, so we were. Mother, of course, did her duty and said she would take some refugees. And so they plonked some refugee girls on us. And I don't know what happened, but Mother didn't like them. They probably didn't know how to eat at the table. And they probably were just sloppy and messy and all the rest of it. And they probably, coming from the East End of London, they probably didn't know anything. And we didn't know that they didn't know anything. So there was total, discord. Anyway, but then the British government sort of said, oh, well, I don't know, the Germans aren't doing so much damage, you can come home. So the refugees left. But there was a second, I don't know quite what happened, but I think there was a second wave of refugees, and Mother refused to take any. But we had to do something. So the big drawing room was leased to the army, and army soldiers slept in their cots in the big drawing room. And there was an outside toilet at that time. We had the bathroom upstairs with one toilet, but the soldiers were not allowed to use the bathroom in the house. They had to go out to the hallway, the front door, walk around two big rooms and across a lawn to get to the outdoor john. And that outdoor john was one of those pit holes. But fortunately for us, the army said, we'll put a proper toilet in. So they put a proper toilet in for nothing.
Wow.
And then that was good. But so we had these soldiers sleeping in the drawing room for quite some time, and they were not supposed to talk to us, and we were not supposed to talk to them.
That's strange.
And then no, it's not strange. They were soldiers. Come on, we were girls. We were teenage girls, young teenagers. June and Cherry were older. Anyway, so there was this, right across the street from us, there was this row of three houses which sat sideways to the street, 90-degree angle to the street. And the first house was occupied by Mrs. Ayres and her mentally disabled son. And the other two houses belonged to her, but apparently they were empty because two families were put into those houses from London. And one of them was called the Pinkowskis, and the other one was called something else that I don't remember. But anyway, the two mothers were sisters, and they both had lots of children, and they lived in those houses. And one of the girls in one of those families was called Joyce. And Joyce and I liked each other. We really liked each other. And we used to try and play ball against the big wall that there was on the street. And somehow or other, my mother always got me back into the house because they weren't good enough, because they were cockneys.
Oh. So class once again.
And then I was sent off to school at Thetford, and so I only saw Joyce in the summer, and the vacations. And so we didn't develop a relationship, but many, many years later, Joyce was getting married to one of the American Air Force people. And before she went to the church, her mother came over to the house and asked me if I'd like to go and see Joyce in her wedding dress. And so I went over and I saw Joyce in her wedding dress. And she was standing in their living room on a nice Persian-style carpet because the floor was a dirt floor. And they had been living with this dirt floor for years. And somebody loaned them the Persian carpet so that she could stand on it in her wedding dress.
These are...
Well, I lived there a long time. I mean, I lived there till I was 20.
Before we get to college, when did golf enter your life?
Oh, when I was 15 or so, my mother paid for me to have golf lessons. And so I had a good training. There was a good professional at the golf club. And so I had a good training. And I was good enough, for this woman to propose that I go on the tour, but I refused.
There's one golf course nearby?
Okay, the golf course my parents played at was called the Royal Wellington Golf Course. And then there was the Thetford Golf Course, which is 12 miles away, and the Bury St. Edmunds Course, which is 12 miles away, and the Newmarket Course, which is 12 miles away. And those three courses were all 18 holes. Mm-hmm. The Wellington Golf Course was only 9 holes, but it had an incredibly good reputation. And it was the course that the Cambridge University golf team used, even though it was only 9 holes. You just played them twice. And it had this incredible reputation. That's why it had a good professional as well. Right. So I played golf all through school at the weekends. And then after I went to work, I played some golf. I didn't play a lot of golf because I was working 5.5 days a week, maybe. And then, of course, I left and went to London. So that was the end of it.
So when was your first trip? When did you first see London?
When did I first what?
See London. When did you
see London?
Yeah. It would have been a big deal.
The first time I really went to London was during the Korean War. And it was when I was working at the Lakenheath Air Force Base. I got to know a captain, Air Force captain at that time. And he said, let's go out to London for the coronation. And so we took a milk train. That was what it was called. We took the train that left at about 3 o'clock in the morning up to London. And I said, "Oh, let's go to Trafalgar Square." So the thing is, we went to Trafalgar Square, and we were on one side of Trafalgar Square, and the coronation procession was on the other side of the square, and so we didn't see much. But it was something. I was seeing London. I don't remember when I went another time, but I do remember seeing devastation in London. Mm. And I don't remember when that was. I remember seeing bombed out places. And the bombed out places lasted a long time because there was no money to rebuild.
Right, the Americans made sure that the British paid their loans back. So that kept Britain in poverty for a lot longer than it should have. It's
been devastating. Absolutely. So anyway, when I left school, I got a job with Josiah Wedgwood and Sons, a China company. We were selling the China in a boutique at the American Air Force Base in the PX. And that's where I met the captain during the Korean War. So that would be 51 or 2.
So you worked for a while before you went to college?
Before I went what?
So you worked after what we would call high school before you went to college?
Yes, I did. I worked for 2 years. I worked at the Air Force Base for a while, and I don't remember whether it was a year or so, but then there was a job opportunity in London. And so I worked in London at Robinson's. And in London, I first of all lived in a rooming house where we had a bed sit. And that meant I had a bed and a gas burner, which I had to pay a shilling at a time, that sort of thing, and make my own meals. Anyway, my aunt who lived nearby, she said, "You can't stay here." And she found a boarding house for me. And it was a boarding house that had quite a lot of young people. And so I shared a room with a girl from Southern Rhodesia and another girl from Australia. And at the weekends, we would go bar hopping and drink cider, Mary Down cider. And on Saturdays afternoons, I would try to go to the theatre because I was working in the West End, and there was an easy walk to the theatres.
I remember seeing any famous actors?
I saw one famous actress, and I don't remember her name, but she was very famous. I saw her in a play that had been written for her. So it wasn't a good play, and I don't remember it. But I have one fabulous memory, and that is of Richard Burton playing a comedy role. Shakespeare comedy. It was fantastic. But that's the only famous person. Those are the only two famous people.
All right. So when did books become a part of your life? Because books have been a part of your life for as long as I've known you.
Oh, well, the thing is, books became a part of my life when I went to school at Thetford. Mr. Wilson was away most of the time because he was a commercial salesman, and so he had to travel. But he had a library. And Mrs. Wilson wasn't a reader, so that wasn't a bit. But then I had very good teachers at school, and they obviously inspired me. And I had the same teachers for many years. I mean, my English teacher was the same teacher from when I first started to when I finished. My history teacher changed, my geography teacher, but the English teacher, yeah. So it's Miss Jukes. She probably inspired me to read. And then the books were available in Mr. Wilson's library. And I can't remember what I read from his library, except for one book. This was after I was living there alone. And Mrs. Wilson would go out in the afternoons and do good works. I don't remember what kind of good works, but I know she did good works. And so she was out for a while. And at some point, I discovered the Well of Loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
You know the Well of Loneliness?
Radcliffe Hall.
Radcliffe Hall.
Didn't Radcliffe Hall write that?
Oh, I don't remember the name of the author now. Anyway, that's the correct title. Well, and so I had to read this a few pages at a time when Mrs. Wilson was not at home because I knew she would not have approved. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know that the book was on the shelves because she wasn't a reader. Anyway, I broadened my knowledge.
So when did you first have a place of your own to live? Your first apartment?
When I first have an apartment?
Yeah, you've been living at home, you've been living in rooming houses, you've been living in boarding houses. When did you have an apartment of your own, or at least an apartment you shared with somebody?